Welcome to episode number 2 with me, Dan Smith, CEO of Doogheno. And thank you so much, Dan, for making it.
That's fine. Looking forward to it.
So first and foremost, obviously the first question, how did you come up with the name Doogheno?
Doogheno is an unusual word. There's a little bit of story about why we were about to launch when I'm going back where it was 6-7 years ago, the company. And we found that one of our competitors did a rebrand and had a very similar name to the name that we were going to launch with. And we found that out the weekend before we were launching, and we had campaigns going out. So I had to do a rebrand very quickly. Now, I'm a big fan of words and wordplay and stuff, including slang. And so I set about looking around different words and different stuff. And Doogheno is actually a word from the 19th century, and it is back slang for market traders used. And market traders would try to hide what things were going on so they could talk without their customers necessarily noticing. And it actually means good one. So Doogheno is back slang for good one, and Dabheno is back slang for bad one. But it's an unusual word. The only other time I've seen it used in any modern thing is some guys have produced a sour beer called Doogheno. I've not tried it. I've never crossed it yet. I will try it when I can find it.
Yeah, perfect. So on your website, it says Doogheno is a multi-award-winning marketing company, bridging the gap between marketing and sales. Can you unpack this gap between marketing and sales, and how do you guys approach it?
Yeah, so might help if my background, other than being an engineer many years ago, I then moved into technical sales and in enterprise sales. And I worked for a long time in enterprise sales, selling technology services. And I always found that the marketing team would be going off doing one thing. And actually, as a salesperson, I needed them to be doing something else. And so there's some good stuff that marketing often does around, brand awareness or whatever. But actually, when you're a salesperson, you care about the leads and you care about the right messaging for those customers. And I've felt so often that they're two sides of the same coin, but they might as well be completely separated. Never seen a marketing person go, "Hey, can I come in and sit in your sales meeting and learn what the customer's saying and what they've said?" And so when I had the opportunity, which is now probably 18 years ago, to start running sales and marketing and looking after the whole thing, I was very keen to make sure that any activities from a marketing perspective were completely aligned with what the salespeople were trying to do, and to make sure that the salespeople were also aligned with what the marketing message was, because marketing will go off and craft great messages, and then salespeople go and sit in meetings and describe stuff completely differently. And then what it means is that quite often the customer gets a disjointed experience. There isn't that continuity. And then when it comes into the kind of the work we do now, the marketing that we do is very much really highly targeted marketing, which is creating opportunities for salespeople. Effectively, when we do what we do in account-based marketing, it's like if I had a salesperson who was totally on it, what would I want him to be doing in terms of prospecting? But knowing that a salesperson isn't a marketer, doesn't have a marketing background, has different priorities and stuff, which means that actually they're never going to do that work. So what we do is we kind of have taken that from my broad experience down into a process and a system which enables us to kind of bring kind of best practice into companies around that sales and marketing. So we don't go into somewhere and say, "Hey, look, we're going to do your rebranding work and that kind of stuff." That's not really where we sit. Where we sit is in the work that we do, which is around account-based marketing.
Yeah, great. And I will. I would like us, like for this episode to be about account-based marketing, and like the main question of this episode is like why account-based marketing. But I think like before asking this, for younger people like me, can you set up the scene? What is account-based marketing? How is it different? What's the benefit? Like, what are the companies that might benefit? Stuff like that.
Absolutely. So account-based marketing. So if you've got a normal marketing side of stuff, what you're trying to do is bring people into the top of the funnel.
Hmm.
You have this broad thing that you might be using lead magnets, you might be using various tools just to bring those people into the top of the funnel. And then what happens is you kind of qualify those people out as time goes by, and you end up, you might stoke 100 people in the funnel and end up with 10. So with account-based marketing, what you're trying to do is go, well, actually, that's initially, who is our ideal customer profile? What does that look like? And a lot of companies have done that piece of work already. If they haven't, it's kind of something that we work with them on, and identifying, looking historically who those customers are. The ideal customer profile often isn't what the CEO thinks it is.
Hmm.
CEO will have this idea it will be these people, and actually, what you want to look at is where does business come from? What is good business? What brings obviously the highest value into there, but also who then sticks around. What's the customer lifetime value? What's the sales cycle? All of those things feed into what might look like the ideal customer profile. And then it's to then go, right, well, if that's the ideal customer profile, why don't we, rather than do this broad thing where we might find that only 15% of those people are in the ideal customer profile, let's just look at the companies who are in that ideal customer profile, and we might go off and identify 200 companies that are in that ideal customer profile. And then we'd say, right, so if we're going to reach out to those companies, how are we going to reach out to them? And what we have to do is then look at an individual level on each company and go, well, what's going on in company A? Where are there any signals going on, that's things that are happening within that company? And effectively, we create an individual marketing campaign for each company.
Hmm.
Now, in reality, you end up with 100 segmenting them and going, right, well, these are at this stage, these are at that stage, these are at that stage. But then we will then go down and do research at a kind of the individual level. So whoever those people are, the right personas, and what we tend to do on there is to look at who's going to be in that buying committee, whether it's a technical buyer, user buyer, all of those things, economic buyer, executive, all of those elements. And we look at those and then we go, right, well, what messaging in that company, what messaging is going to resonate with the technical buyer, and we try to find any signals and stuff and any intent signals, and then create a messaging for that individual.
Hmm.
So it's really targeted. It's really targeted. So rather than going out with this kind of, let's pull people into the funnel, what we're trying to do is go, let's get people who we know that if we have a conversation with, based on our experience with other customers, these are the people who are likely to want to buy the service, certainly would engage with it. Now, obviously, that work and that smaller amounts of accounts doesn't work for everybody. So if you're selling a $10 a month SaaS service, you're not going to do that kind of work.
Yeah.
So we tend to work with people whose monthly recurring revenue figures are really a minimum of around 4,000 a month. So it's kind of like a $50,000 product that they're buying, because then it's worthwhile doing that. Because if you close 5 of those, it's $250,000. It's well worth
Hmm.
doing it. And that would, based on that and based on our pricing, that'd give about a 10-to-1 return
Wow.
on the marketing spend. It's so doesn't fit every company, but if you're working on larger ticket sales and you've got definitely got a finite market or finite markets,
Hmm.
that means you can't burn through 500 companies and then go, right, I've contacted all those, I've got nothing else to do or say because that is our market. So you can't build a bad reputation within there. You have to build trust and build a reputation. So it's a softer sale. It's not a kind of a transactional sale. It's about trying to build a relationship, build awareness, and then build those people through to actually go, yeah, I want to have a conversation with these people.
Okay, so I have some dumb questions. So if
Question. Well, we'll see.
okay, so let's say I want to try ABM. Do I need to like have people already in my pipeline, or like the whole point of like employing an agency like you is that you guys go ahead and initiate the conversation between my prospects and me? Is it
it can be at various stages. So sometimes we're going out and we're kind of bringing in new prospects into companies. Other times we might be working with companies who have an existing relationship there already, but they might be, selling a small amount in there and they want more of that wallet share. And they want to go wider and deeper. So you might have somebody who's selling into one department in a massive company and thinking, how can we actually expand out through that company? So we would be doing things like mapping the org chart, finding the right people who's reporting. It's all stuff that you could say there's a salesperson go for do it, but a salesperson takes a path of least resistance. They don't like doing the hard work. They like doing I used to be a salesman, I know. They like doing the easy stuff. They'll go and get distracted, go, oh, shiny, and run off because they've got a deal over there and forget that. And marketing teams on the whole don't have the resource to spend time doing this stuff. So some people, when we speak to them, we augment their existing team. And sometimes we're doing it all from scratch. So quite often we create an account-based marketing team. And if there's roles in there, which could be, well, there will be roles like executive role and the salesperson, etc., within the customer's company, then we want them to be a part of that team because with all these things, it has to be completely aligned with the company's objectives rather than, say, a salesperson's objectives, which are not necessarily the same. But we need to have that visibility so we can do it. So to answer your question, if somebody came to us with a pipeline of some existing relationships that needed to be built or companies which they've identified that they want to go after, or they come to us with a blank sheet of paper and just say, we need to do more in this space, then we will help them. So some people do it in-house, but it's hard to have the resource in-house and the time and the skills to do this work in-house.
So how do you guys approach ABM? Like, what are the channels that you utilize to initiate that conversation with the prospect? Is it like a cold email? I don't know, LinkedIn?
We don't rule anything out, but so if it involved me wearing a sandwich board, walking up and down the street outside somebody's offices, we would, well, not me, but somebody, we wouldn't rule out something like that. But the core ones, which we use, the ones which are common in campaigns, is LinkedIn. It is cold email. We generally use physical letters going out to people. We put calling in there. We might be doing targeted ads on LinkedIn, sometimes targeted ads on Google. So those are core ones which we work. Sometimes we'll put gifts into the sequence, low value gifts. So, for example, we've used it was coming up to summer, so we had some branded beach balls go out for one customer, and the idea of that is everybody's doing the digital approach. Everybody's doing LinkedIn, cold email, all that stuff works. But what you've got to try to do is disrupt that pattern. You send 10 emails to somebody and they might read every one, but they won't take an action. But if you've got a sequence built out going across these channels and you have something like a a letter, and we work mainly with tech companies. So tech companies never think of doing anything which isn't digital. So when you actually say, well, let's actually put a nice letter that you read, you know stuff about, you might be congratulate them, that company on a contract win or something like that, that goes out to them. That's going to land on somebody's desk. And even now, when everybody's working from home, it will at least be scanned, land in there from their office, and they'll open it and read it. You know they're going to read it. You know they're going to interact because it's something different. And that means, and we tend to, in our sort of our cadence, we tend to have the letter, and the letter's generally followed up by a call, because you've got a reason then. Hey, I sent you a letter. Did you receive? Just checking you received it. And then we often find at that stage, people go, yeah, and I've seen your emails before, and I'm not interested, or yeah, let's actually have a chat. And so we build these sequences out, which we use those. But as I say, we don't rule anything out. So in some research, we might find on the individual level, we might find some commonality within there. Like they might all be into a certain sport or something, and then we might go, well, actually, depending on the size of the organisation, is it worth sponsoring something to get people to go to that sport, or an event or something? Or we will be tracking those individuals. So if we know that they're attending an event, we can then reach out and put into the sequence, hey, John, I know that you're attending Expo 98 or whatever, showing my age, 2028. Can we have a coffee while you're there? So we're bringing in all of that information the whole time. But another thing we've done before are billboards. So we had somebody trying to get into a particular company, and there was a billboard which was pretty much right opposite where these people would be putting out of their car park, and it was cheap because it was out of the and so we put a great big billboard thing up there, basically, so people go, yeah, I've seen your name somewhere. Yeah, every time you drive out from work going home, our name's right in front of you. So we're while it is these kind of fairly common core things that we have, we will try to bring in other things which disrupt that pattern a little bit, that gets people thinking. We use Lego as well. That's quite a common one that we will use. And sometimes we've held a piece back and then sent that on a following letter saying, if you're looking for the missing piece within your stuff, within your business, it's us, and here's a missing piece for that. And just creative ideas which just get those people, our customers, noticed. And that's the idea. And all this is, we're working with, for a target, hundreds of companies. So these things actually don't end up being particularly expensive, because you're not doing something that's going out to 10,000 people, which then would just become prohibitive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. So as you mentioned, so ABM is known for its personalized approach to like B2B, like in marketing in general. So how do you guys balance personalization with the need to scale up marketing efforts?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So we kind of offer multiple levels of account-based marketing. So if we're doing a one-to-one level, and I'm trying to get hold of you, Mike, particularly, and this tends to be when we're working with companies who've got a really limited market. They might only have 50 companies that can buy their stuff. At the one-to-one level, we will be doing research down onto you as an individual, and all that communication out to you is all bespoke to that individual, because it has to be. When we start scaling that up, what we might do is go, well, actually, we've got 6 contacts in this company. One's our absolute key one, the other's a supporting one. So we'll write the really in-depth researched work for one individual, and the others will be slightly broader. So they might be pulling the company-based information into that, but then just working at persona level rather than the individual level. So if we've got, as I said, let's say we've got that 100 companies, what we might be doing is pulling in a news story which relates. And we can go right, well, that's one news story that can relate to 6 people, and that how that fits in is just at persona level into that, but it's still very individual onto there. And if we're doing wider, we do this sometimes, we might be going out to 1,000, 2,000 companies. Realistically, that might end up having 10,000 individuals. At 10,000 individuals, we can't do that level of research because, frankly, nobody's going to pay us to do that level of research on there. And then what we tend to do, again, we segment it. So there's lots of different segmented messages that we're putting these people into. But then we might be pulling their information off something like their company description on LinkedIn. And then we use Open AI to write a personalization based on that. So, but then we have to go through and we tend to edit those. We tend to find probably 80% pass, go there, fine. 20% you look at and you go, I can't send that. It looks ridiculous. So we're a customer who's looking at biopharma companies, and it would sound completely disingenuous if they go, oh, I've been really interested in how you've been modeling this genome on this. They're an IT person, they don't know about that. So in an instance like that, what we might do is actually write, I've been reading about your modeling this genome, I can't. And then if they're all of these kind of things, similar type stuff, and then in the prompts which you're writing might be saying, phrasing it kind of, I can't pretend to actually understand that, but what I do understand is, in that case, I don't know, cost reduction in cloud computing or something like that. So it's still, when the person gets it, it's relevant, it's in their world, but what you're not doing is churning out these, you see so many of these opening lines which are churned out by AI, which just basically say, I see them all the time. I also get a lot of cold emails into there. It'll say, oh, it's great to see Doogheno does account management, account-based, and it does. And you look at that, and just go, that's just crap. Also, when we bring in personalization, we never use it as the opening line. We use it within the body of the email, so it doesn't look like one of those clunky opening. So, but even at that, at scale, we've segmented everything multiple times. So if we've got 10,000 people are going out to, probably those segments might only be 250 people in each segment. So there's still an awful lot of manual work to get to those, to get to that level. But if you don't do that, then you're just spraying and praying, hoping that it's going to hit. So it does, you can bring in automate. Obviously within automation, you can automate the sequences and stuff like that once you've got all of that work done. But at the research stage and at the personalization stage, you can't. And then we also, for example, if we've got letters, and if depending on where the letter is, if the letter is at say stage 4, it might be nearly 2 months after that initial research is done. So what we would do before letters going out is that we would be refreshing there, looking for news stories. So what's going out on those letters is really up to date and fresh. And we tend to, if letters are going out, we tend to send letters to the key people we're after rather than everybody within the company, just because there's work, there's cost involved in delivering that. And if you're sending it to, say, the financial buyer, he's not going to actually really be interested in the letter. What you want to get that in the hand of that person who's really going to be making the decision whether they engage with you or not. Financial buyers, great if you're further down the funnel, but at that point, we're still trying to engage people in that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different directions that we can move with this conversation right now. But before anything, since you mentioned cold email, and this is one of my passions, I have to ask, what are some of your favorite subject lines?
Do you know, subject lines is a really tough and hard thing to do. And so often they are uh, overused
Mhm.
by people. I can't tell you how many times I get quick question pop up in my inbox. It's like, well, what are you selling to me? Uh, Generally now, the approach I use is custom subject lines taken from a company's uh, the research we do at company level, but that might just be from their LinkedIn description. We run that through OpenAI and write a custom subject line for everybody within the campaign.
Mhm. What is that, like a specific software that you use for
Uh,
AI?
so it's just using OpenAI.
So like
So
just manually through ChatGPT
no, you can use the OpenAI. You
API?
can yeah, so you can.
Mhm.
So my sequence, I'll let you into the secret sequence here. So if I had for the subject lines, for example, if I had their company LinkedIn URL, I would pull that in. I use a tool called Derek.
Mhm.
That will just go and pull that into a Google Sheet. And then the Google Sheet is connected up to OpenAI. And then I put my prompt into there
Mhm.
and write a subject line based on that prompt. It takes an age to get the prompts right. And so I've got a library of prompts, which I
Mhm.
start with, um, but they don't. The frustrating thing with prompts is they don't always perform the same way.
Exactly.
And so, again, you have to check these, but also you know that if you've got a new campaign, that it's likely you're going to actually have to be writing new prompts for all of these in these segments, just so they just the tone feels right because uh, it has to feel completely human. Because when we're doing the outreach has to feel like it's coming from a person within our customer's company, and if it feels artificial, if it feels manufactured at any time during there, then it reduces the chance of it working.
Mhm.
So, um, as for a favorite subject line, I mean, we have literally hundreds a day of different subject lines going out, which are all customized uh, from there. I'm yet to have, I used to use Quick Question
Mhm.
myself for years, and it used to work really well. Uh, and I've looked at lots of, always keep my eye on that. And there's lots of people with cute ideas going out, but I think from what we're doing with higher ticket stuff, it's about credibility and it's about trust.
Mhm.
So if your subject line is great to make somebody open an email, but actually it isn't reinforcing the credibility and trust, then it's actually going to have a negative effect.
Mhm.
So it's tempting sometimes to use kind of clickbaity subject lines, but in what we're doing, they just don't really fit with how the customers
Mhm. Yeah.
customers work.
Have you tried hiring freelancers to like write the first lines?
Yeah, I have. Um,
How has been your experience?
it's been poor.
Mm.
It's been poor. I think part of that is we work with high technology companies who've got a really targeted audience, and unless you've got somebody who is experienced in business and has an idea of that, and bear in mind we're kind of niche, so this doesn't apply to everybody. But unless you've got somebody who has got that, they can't get the tone right, and
Mhm.
and because they don't understand, they don't necessarily. I'll use that example for the biopharma stuff. They don't necessarily understand that somebody won't understand that. Then they're looking for those things, and it just comes out uh, in a rubbish way. So what we do, and I talked about using the AI stuff, is we actually, myself, one of our other directors, for every campaign, we write some.
Mhm.
And that, because that tells us what level and standard that we want to be coming out of our, if we're doing it at the prompt level, what level we want to be coming out of there, rather than just accepting something which looks okay because you're just firing out a load of these things. But so we write this, but we can't write those at scale unless we're doing the one-to-one one, and then those are all written there, and we tend to write those either the directors of our company right there, or we have a couple of the researchers we work with are experienced in business and do that, and we would use those guys because when the researchers are working, they might be doing company level research, and they've got to be making loads of subjective decisions about whether the company's right or whether those people are right. And again, you need somebody who's got experience to be able to make those subjective decisions, to be able to look on a website and go, here are my 20 criteria points, but you're never going to find all those 20 in plain writing as a tick box. You need somebody to be able to go and look and read between the lines and be able to, and be able to read an annual report and that kind of stuff. So it's, it can be really involved. So first-time writers, if they're from Upwork or whatever, if those guys aren't just sitting there running it through OpenAI, I'd be really surprised now.
Yeah.
So to find somebody who can do it properly is hard.
Yeah. What do you think of podcast as a medium for ABM?
So,
because I know some agencies that like they come into your business, they launch a podcast for you, and then you can use that as a way to like reach your prospects.
So I think not probably so much at ABM. So ABM needs to be supported by other brand activities being done by a marketing company. The old marketing adage that somebody needs to see something 8 times before they'll take an action. I actually think it's probably far higher nowadays. We're bombarded with so much stuff across so much. So the more work that you can do around brand and brand awareness and specific brand awareness for your target market, the better. So if you're sitting on a podcast and you're a technology provider and you know that those people that you are trying to target listen to that podcast, then there's value to be on that podcast. But it's hard as a vendor to be invited, unless you are a big name vendor or have something absolutely amazing. It's hard to be invited on a podcast to be able to speak because everybody sees it as a sales pitch. But I think podcasts are great. I mean, I was looking at doing some stuff a while ago, and actually one of the acquisition strategy was around running a podcast and inviting people onto a podcast because you knew that you could have that engaged conversation with somebody. So, but I think when you're running something like a podcast, as you know, you're running a podcast, there's an awful lot of work to it. So I can see value and I can see a position for it. It's not something that we have done. And as I say, we don't rule out anything, but we did, as I say, when we were looking at a strategy for somebody, it was an element which we were seriously considering for that company. And in the end, we didn't end up working with them, but I might be seeing him with a different answer if we had.
So what do you think of, maybe you mentioned it that I didn't catch it. So what do you think, like you launch a podcast, but like the goal is not to reach your prospect like as a listener, you just invite them as a guest, and then like you try to like.
That was exactly the strategy that we were going to put forward for this company. So it was to basically, the podcast was going to be around the subject matter which they dealt with, but all the guests were going to be from people that would be from their target audience. They didn't go ahead with that strategy, so I can't tell you whether it would work or not. We thought it would work, but they didn't go ahead with the strategy, so we don't know if it would work. And a lot of the companies that we work with wouldn't have the appetite or the resource to do that in-house. And as you know, it takes a lot of time. So it'd have to be the right opportunity, the right company to do that. But to say, something we identified before, it might have been nice to see if it would work. But what I wouldn't want to be doing, again, this goes back to this trust thing, is people feel that it's disingenuous that you don't have these people. So what we've done before, which is slightly different, but in the similar vein, is that we've held industry roundtables and gone out to people and said, we really love your input into this roundtable, and it'll just be all peers speaking. There's nobody selling there. It's just all peers just being facilitated. And then actually taking that output as well. So obviously you've got those initial conversations, but then you've got this industry roundtable output, which is of high value to other people within the industry, and say, we held this roundtable with 20 people. Would you be interested in hearing what their thoughts were? And most people in the similar sector would go, yeah, of course I would. So bringing that kind of end customer generated content into it is something that definitely does work.
Yeah. Okay, so your client's objection was that like this method would be quote unquote dishonest, something like that.
No, it was the fear of being slightly disingenuous, reaching out to people saying, hey, do you want to be on a podcast? But actually with the real intention that is using it as an opportunity to sell to them.
Yeah.
So there's a fine line there between doing that and actually having something which is credible on there. And to do that, you need to have 3 or 4 people warmed up, friendly people, because then you can say, hey, so-and-so's done it, so-and-so's done it. And then they'll go, okay, there is some value to this. But podcasts, there are hundreds and thousands of those out there. But people like vanity, I'm sat on here chatting to you. People like sharing their opinions. But I think there's value to it. I think there's an angle to it within there. I think there's a lot of work in a company and they get a bit scared if they have to do a lot of work and put resource in.
Yeah. Okay, so back to basics. When you launch a campaign, what is the most important KPI that you're focused on?
It really depends. So one of the things that we do in our process is understand what the objectives are of the company. So for most companies, what they're interested at the end of the day is getting a return, making sales and closing. So understanding what that objective is. But for others, it might be just getting deeper into a company. So if they've got one set, it might be actually, now do we have a relationship with 5 people in that company instead of that one point of contact we had? But for most people, it's going to be ultimately getting return from that. In actual fact, we have some different models around our pricing, but we often will run a campaign at near cost for us, and then we get paid out as a percentage on the sales that they generate on the back of this campaign, providing there's a hell of a lot of qualifying criteria before we will do that. But then our key metric as well is the sales, which they make off the back of that. So we are completely aligned with the customers that we work with. And another model that we do sometimes is that we will guarantee our work, again, depending if they meet the criteria or not. And basically, if they haven't got their campaign spend back, or a pipeline 5 times higher, we basically carry on working until they do. Never had to carry on working because we've always achieved that, but actually it overcomes people's fear. But the main KPI people want to look at is sales. But to do that, you have to look at all the other KPIs all the way through. So we're measuring everything, what levels of engagement you get to, open rate, click rate, connection rate on LinkedIn. All of those things have been measured all the way through the campaign. I have a guy whose sole job is to be looking at all those metrics on a day-to-day basis, just so we can measure and then adjust as we need to. Because there's no point in running something and 3 weeks later realizing that you're not on track to do it. And as if things with cold email, small changes can make a big difference on cold email. But then some technical things, you might suddenly find that actually you haven't got your delivery rate where it should be. Something's happened on that and all that. So all of that stuff is, from our side, is measured on a daily basis and reviewed on a daily basis, just to make sure that technically things are working. I always think about this in a campaign. The first thing I want to make sure is that is it delivering? Is it within our kind of benchmark brackets? That's the first thing. If it's doing that, I could kind of tick and go, right, great. I'm happy with that. Now let's focus on actually making it really work, because you can get it 80% right first of all, but it's that 15% that makes a difference between people looking and replying and engaging. And that 15% is incredibly hard. That comes down to copy, sentiment, all of those things. And that's when it becomes really tough.
Mm-hmm. Great. So, all right, as we wrap up here, I would love to ask your opinion about the future. So, like, when you look back on the evolution of marketing and like the current trends, where do you see the future of marketing, especially ABM, is heading in the next 5 to 10 years?
So it's a really interesting question, because I think actually the role of a salesperson has changed a lot, which means the role of marketing has to change. So back when I was working in enterprise sales, it was always about becoming the trusted advisor, that you would want to have the relationship with the customer, and you'd be able to go to them and say, hey, what are you doing on this? Have you considered this? Have you considered that? Whatever. That doesn't work anymore. You're not the trusted advisor. They'll go and Google it. They will go and look at all these other sources of information. It's too many sources of information. A salesperson is not going to be as well informed as the customer anymore. So the customer doesn't want the salesperson to be being that source of information, which means marketing needs to stop doing things like going, oh, look, we've produced a great white paper. It's like, well, unless it's really unique, interesting information, it's just fluff. Nobody's going to read it. And so we're in that stage where companies are going to have to work harder to win customers. And when I think about account-based marketing, as I said before, it's not about people filling the top of the funnel. It's about bringing those people in further down the funnel. And that kind of is where I see that marketing needs to get to, bringing those people further down the funnel. And if you're not using account-based marketing, you need to be thinking about your broader marketing to go, actually, do I have the budget to do the awareness stuff? Am I HubSpot? Can I write 1,000,001 content articles to do inbound marketing? And most people aren't. And most people try things like inbound marketing, write all this content, and realize 18 months later that it's really not generating what they thought, and then they have to go and do outbound and activities and stuff. So I think being more intelligent about your customer, understanding your customer more, and higher levels of personalization are all things that all marketing needs to do going forward. And account-based marketing is all about understanding the customer, having that intelligence, and that level of personalization. So to me, account-based marketing is definitely the route forward. There are tools out there. If you look at a tool like Apollo, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with, and people listening probably familiar with, starts to enable salespeople to be able to be a lot more granular of who they're looking at and who they're targeting, and building those things out. That's a great step forward. day to day for marketing people could do. They still need to be really clear on their messaging and their tone and understanding how to do all of those things. So you can't just go and bash through things, but that's a step forward. And I think the tools are only with AI are only become more and more sophisticated. So we use tools around intent signals into customers. AI is going to enable those intent signals to be stronger. So you can start judging things like sentiment. You could look at, from our point of view, there are things that we could analyze somebody's LinkedIn posts, judge their sentiment, and know what tone of voice to use for them. We don't do that kind of level of stuff, but it's not going to be long before that level of stuff is actually practical to be used. So I could be contacting you in a tone of voice which you are most willing to accept. I did a project about 18 months ago, which involved interviewing a lot of programmers from around the world and developers around the world. So a developer in Bulgaria is a completely different personality type to a developer in Colombia. So while you can broach the subject with the same information, the way that they're going to want to engage with that, the way they're going to read it, not just the channels, but actually the tone within it changes. And if you can start to use tools which enable that kind of level of personalization, that feel to people, then your marketing's going to be better. The idea that you can produce one piece of content which is going to be relevant to your whole market really is unrealistic. We all want personalization in everything that we do, but there also has to be it's about getting that tone right. Because if you go cross that line in the personalization, if you try to be too cute with it, then actually you go back to that thing about trust and credibility. You break that. But so where do I say it? More information about the actual customer, thinking about the customer rather than about what you're selling, and personalization, and that's what account-based marketing ultimately is. But I think any marketing needs to be doing that.
Perfect. So one last question here, and then we can wrap up. Speaking of future and AI and all of that, you have a post from Surf to Surf, your role in a techno-feudalist future. And
Yep.
Somewhere in that post, you say, quote unquote, "For many, I believe the future will be a kind of slavery." Can you elaborate on that?
It's without going into the whole article. I think I've got a real interest in the effects of technology onto people. And I'm a fellow at the Royal Society of Arts, which isn't an arts organisation. It's an organisation about ideas. And I worked around their future of work program, and they had 3 different futures depending on that. And one of the futures is that we're going to, with the rise of AI, it's going to, well, we all know it's going to remove certain jobs. It's going to make what would have been white collar jobs, knowledge jobs. We've already seen it, you can legal AI and that kind of open AI passing bar exams and that kind of stuff. All those people should be really worried about the future and about what that means to them and where their place is within that. I could go on about this stuff for hours and hours on there, but I do feel that it's going to end up with a lot of people that are going to have they're going to be in a system where things all around them are automated and stuck in that system. And the place where unless they're adding really high value, the places they're going to be and the work they're going to be doing is the stuff which is messy and doesn't really work with automation or can't be automated, and doing that kind of grunt work, for want of a better word, for that. And so I think there's going to be, in 25 years' time, if we don't get this right, when my daughter's off out in the working world, and the jobs that we see at the moment, I think, are going to be looking very different, and a lot of them won't exist. I've been saying for the last 8 or 9 years, stop teaching kids to code at school. Coding is not with a skill that people want. Understand the principles, but the coding is all going to be done by machines. What we need to have is people who have ideas, who have creativity, who can do lateral thinking. That's what people should be taught at school, or else they're going to be stuck within a really limited amount of jobs. It's the people who have the great ideas who are the people who are going to be out there succeeding in the world. And those great ideas can be at a million small levels. They don't have to be the great big ideas, but it's the ideas and the creativity which is going to save people being stuck doing these low-level jobs. Certain things will never be automated. Yes, you can automate in a coffee shop, but you're still going to want somebody to bring you your wine in a restaurant. You're not going to want a robot to do that. So certain jobs will never be automated, but I think the future will actually see, unlike in other industrial revolutions, the future will see it be the white-collar people who lose their jobs. I run an agency, and I probably would have 3 more members of staff if I didn't use automation and AI. Certainly on automation, it's happening all around us. Those are jobs that I didn't create because I had tools to do it, and enables us to be cost effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Ben, thank you so much for this conversation. I love your insights. Do you have any advice, any book recommendation? Anything is appreciated for people like me who are new to this field?
Just keep learning. Just no individual book. I've got a stack of books next to me. They might be 2 years old, but they're out of date. So just keep learning. I'd probably spend 2 hours a day on just trying to bring ideas in, be really open to new ideas. I think that's a really important thing, and always just be looking at what's going on there. The tools and stuff I use now, I didn't use 6 months ago. In 6 months' time, I'm probably going to be using other tools.
Yeah,
you can't rely on that. And marketing changes all the time. The way that people, we had the pandemic. Suddenly people weren't in the office, everybody worked from home, but also it's changed people's attitude to work and how they deal with work. And all of those things have to be taken into account, and that's over the last 3 years. And the next 3 years are going to be other things that are going to happen. So you have to be really open to always be adapting and learning, and never rule anything out. And so I would say that to everybody, just don't think that you know it, because there's always something else. Something else.
Agreed. Well, thank you so much again. That was amazing.
Okay, thank you, Mike.